Hotels are strange places if you think about it long enough. Thousands of people pass through the same rooms, sleep in the same beds, walk the same carpeted hallways, year after year, decade after decade. Some of those people never leave happy, some never leave at all. And according to countless guests, employees, and investigators, some of them never really leave the building. We are not talking about ghost stories invented to sell souvenir mugs in a gift shop. We are talking about hotels with documented deaths, unexplained structural events, decades of consistent witness testimony from strangers who never spoke to each other, and in some cases, genuine electronic evidence collected by professional investigation teams using thermal cameras, electromagnetic field detectors, and audio recorders. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, something about these places keeps drawing attention, and once you hear what has been recorded inside their walls, you may understand why. Let's begin high in the Rocky Mountains, in the small town of Estes Park, Colorado, at a hotel that needs almost no introduction. The Stanley Hotel opened its doors in 1909, built by Freeland Oscar Stanley, a man who had come to Colorado not for business, but for his health. Stanley suffered from tuberculosis, and doctors at the time believed the clean mountain air might save his life. It worked well enough that he decided to build a grand hotel in the same mountains that had given him a second chance. What Stanley could not have known is that his hotel would eventually become one of the most famous haunted locations in American history, not because of a single tragic death, but because of decades of strange occurrences reported by staff and guests alike. In 1974, a young author named Stephen King checked into room 217 with his wife. The hotel was nearly empty, preparing to close for the winter season. That night, King had a vivid nightmare about his 3-year-old son being chased through the hotel's halls by a fire hose. He woke up, and by the time he fell back asleep, the outline of a novel had already formed in his mind. That novel became The Shining, and though the film adaptation was shot elsewhere, the hotel that inspired it has never stopped drawing attention. But the hauntings at the Stanley predate King's visit by decades. Long before his novel made the hotel famous, staff members were already whispering about strange happenings on the 4th floor. Housekeepers reported that freshly made beds would appear slept in again within minutes. Guests who had never met each other reported hearing the sound of a piano playing somewhere in the building late at night, only for staff to check and find the ballroom completely empty and locked. Some guests reported waking to the feeling of someone sitting on the edge of their bed, only to find no one there when they turned on the lights. Room 217 in particular has built its own reputation independent of King's novel. In 1911, a chambermaid named Elizabeth Wilson was in that very room when a lightning storm caused a gas leak to ignite, triggering an explosion that blew her through the floor. Remarkably, she survived, though she suffered severe injuries. She continued working at the hotel for years afterward, and according to staff who worked alongside her, she never seemed bitter about what had happened. Guests who stay in that room today report the sensation of someone tidying up after them, folding clothes they left out, closing suitcases they left open, as if an unseen presence is still performing the duties of a chambermaid who never truly clocked out. The Stanley Hotel eventually embraced its reputation rather than hiding from it, allowing paranormal investigation teams to conduct overnight studies using electromagnetic field readers and infrared cameras. Some of these investigations captured unexplained temperature drops in specific rooms, along with audio recordings containing what investigators describe as electronic voice phenomena, brief and often unclear sounds that some interpret as whispered words. Skeptics point out that old buildings naturally produce temperature fluctuations due to poor insulation and aging pipework, and that electronic voice phenomena are notoriously open to interpretation, shaped as much by the listener's expectations as by the actual sound. Still, the sheer volume of consistent reports from strangers across more than 100 years has kept researchers coming back with better equipment every time. But the Stanley is far from the only hotel with a reputation built on more than rumor. Thousands of miles away on the California coastline, the Hotel del Coronado carries its own unresolved mystery, one that has never been fully explained, despite more than a century of investigation. In November of 1892, a young woman named Kate Morgan checked into the Hotel del Coronado under a false name. She told staff she was waiting for her brother to arrive. He never did. 5 days later, her body was found on an exterior staircase leading to the beach, a wound to her head, a revolver beside her. The death was ruled a suicide, though the case had troubling gaps from the very beginning. The gun was reportedly the wrong caliber for her wound according to some accounts of the investigation, and the true identity of the man she had been waiting for was never conclusively established. Newspapers of the era speculated wildly, some suggesting she had been the victim of foul play connected to a troubled marriage, others insisting she had simply been a woman driven to despair by abandonment. What we do know for certain is that Kate Morgan was a real person who genuinely stayed at the hotel, and that the circumstances of her death were never fully resolved to the satisfaction of investigators at the time. In the decades since, staff and guests staying in what is now referred to as the Kate Morgan Room have reported flickering lights, television sets turning on by themselves in the middle of the night, and the unmistakable feeling of being watched while alone in the room. Some guests have reported the scent of her perfume, a soft floral smell with no apparent source, drifting through the room and then vanishing entirely. The hotel's own historians do not shy away from her story. Rather than dismiss the reports, staff maintain detailed records of guest experiences, and the room has become something of a pilgrimage site for those interested in unresolved American mysteries. What makes this case stand apart from many ghost stories is the paper trail. Kate Morgan's death was documented by contemporary newspapers, and modern researchers have used genealogical records to trace her real identity, discovering that she had used an alias and that her personal life was far more complicated than her public image suggested. The mystery is not simply whether her spirit remains in that room. The mystery is what actually happened to her in the first place, and that question has never been definitively answered. But that wasn't the strangest part of what we found while researching haunted hotels across the country. Deep in the Ozark Mountains of Arkansas sits a building with a far darker and more disturbing history than either of the previous two locations, one connected not to a single death, but to a systematic pattern of suffering that unfolded over years. The Crescent Hotel in Eureka Springs opened in 1886 as a luxury resort for wealthy travelers seeking the region's natural spring water, believed at the time to have healing properties. For years it operated as an elegant getaway, but by the 1930s, changing travel habits had left the hotel struggling financially. That's when a man named Norman Baker purchased the property, and what happened next transformed the Crescent Hotel from a beautiful mountain retreat into something far more sinister. Baker was not a licensed physician, though he presented himself as one. He converted the hotel into what he called a cancer treatment hospital, promising desperate patients a cure using methods that had no basis in legitimate medicine. Patients paid enormous sums of money for treatments that did nothing to help their conditions, and according to many historical accounts, actively worsened their suffering. Baker was eventually convicted of mail fraud and sentenced to federal prison, but by then, an unknown number of patients had already died within those walls, many of them far from home, isolated from their families, having spent their final months believing they were being cared for by a legitimate medical institution. This history is not paranormal speculation. It is a matter of public record, documented in court proceedings and contemporary journalism from the era. What followed, however, enters more uncertain territory. Staff and guests at the Crescent Hotel have reported feelings of profound sadness in certain hallways, disembodied crying, and apparitions dressed in what witnesses describe as old-fashioned medical attire, wandering the corridors late at night. The basement, once used as a morgue during Baker's operation of the building, is consistently described by visitors and staff as having an oppressive, heavy atmosphere, even those who claim no belief in the supernatural. Paranormal investigation teams who have studied the Crescent Hotel over the years have recorded electromagnetic field spikes concentrated specifically in the areas once used for Baker's fraudulent treatments, along with audio recordings that many investigators interpret as distressed voices. Again, skeptics offer reasonable alternative explanations, pointing to old wiring as a source of electromagnetic anomalies, and suggesting that audio interpretations are shaped heavily by suggestion and expectation. But even those who dismiss the paranormal claims tend to agree that the documented human suffering that occurred in that building during Baker's operation is disturbing enough on its own, without needing ghosts to explain the unease so many visitors report feeling. Then everything changed when researchers began comparing notes across hotels that had never been connected before, discovering strikingly similar patterns of reported activity in buildings separated by thousands of miles and completely different histories.